Have you been caused new anxiety by the way we've been exposed, the thinness of our defence?
Well, I think there are two elements that concern me. One is that, and I think that we do need to ensure that as an alliance, we've got sufficient capability across the board. Only the United States is big enough really to have full spectrum defence capabilities. Therefore, there's got to be a pretty brutal debate amongst the rest of the, particularly European allies, as to who does what. Britain contributes our nuclear deterrence. We've got our carrier strike capability, which includes, for example, the F-35 aircraft, which are not cheap. We've got the upgrading of our nuclear submarines. We've got our big increase in our cyber capability. Can the United Kingdom really be expected to provide a lot of the land defences for continental Europe, which should surely be the job of countries like Germany and France, who are part of continental Europe? So there needs to be a wider debate, and I think that we need to focus on what is in Britain's national interest in terms of our defence, and what do we need, frankly, to be encouraging our partners to do that they're not doing sufficiently.
If I were the Russians, I'd be waiting for Western allied fatigue with the war, and I'd be looking in particular towards the United States election. Ukraine might well be an issue during that election, and there might be a change of policy if the Republicans were to occupy the White House. You know a lot about what's going on in the United States, particularly on the Conservative side. Give me some feel for whether you think the Republicans are minded to switch the policy.
So I think on both wings, on the left of the Democratic Party and on the right of the Republican Party, you've got that traditional isolationist mentality and people saying, well, why should America be spending this amount of money on a war that has nothing to do with them? And I think the answer to your question really lies in the mainstream of both parties, recognising that what happens outside America will have an effect on America's security, either in the short, medium or long terms. And I think that there's still quite a strong level of support on both sides for the recognition that what is happening at the present time isn't just a battle about Russia versus Ukraine. It's about the maintenance of international law and whether we want to live in a world where there are rules. Russia wants to move to a world where might is right and we don't stick with law. That would have a huge impact on everything we do, not least the NATO political alliance. So I think that as long as the leadership in America remains in the mainstream of both parties, then it's relatively secure that American support will continue. It's if you get to the fringes of the parties, I think that you get that terribly isolationist, America doesn't need to bother about the rest of the world, which of course has always ended up in America becoming more involved in disputes around the world.
You and I were smoking quietly to ourselves. We saw John Bolton a moment ago on GBNews saying that he's determined to stop Donald Trump getting back. For instance, if Donald Trump did get back, would that move this debate to the fringe?
I don't know. I think it's interesting, of course, that the incursions into Georgia and Crimea and Ukraine didn't occur on either the watch of George Bush or Donald Trump. I mean, that may be one conspiracy theory too far. But I think it's quite clear that the majority of the Republicans are in one place on this, and I don't think it would be advantageous to any candidate to be out of line with that broad Republican opinion. And I don't see that happening yet, although it's not out of the question. And then, of course, we have the very strange primary system that the Americans have,
of course,
which can throw up some quite odd results, largely based on how many candidates actually run. So I'm sure John Bolton, like the rest, will be considering the size of the field and whether that, in fact, would favour Donald Trump before he would be willing to throw his hat into the ring.